Hey, everybody. Welcome to LeanIn, a conversation about dance, but much, much, much more. I want to welcome everyone to this episode. If you're watching now, I'd like to ask you to maybe let your friends know that you're watching and to get others to come and watch. And if for some reason they're not able to watch right now, this is being recorded and it will be up on our Facebook page as well as YouTube later. But the conversation that we're going to have today, I think, is really, really important. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So, as you all know, or you should know, that this month is Black History Month. And I was planning on doing something around that subject. And what led me to that was I was doing some research, and I've been a strong opponent of that. For us to go somewhere, we need to know about where we've been, how we got here, who's here now, and where we want to go next. And we can only figure out how to get to where we want to go next if we know where we came from. And so I started looking up some of the history that I knew of in Portland and Oregon. And I was kind of shocked that there wasn't a lot mentioned about individuals and groups of color that have been here and are here and were here. And I was speaking with a friend of mine, Bobby Fowler, and I was like, Bobby, what happened to this? And where are these people? And why isn't anyone talking about this? And he's like, I know. So I had the plan to do this. And then a friend of mine, the manager at my bank, he calls me up and he says, hey, Robert, I see that you guys are doing something for Black History Month. And I was like, yeah. And he says, well, I don't know if this would be appropriate or if you'd be interested, but, and I didn't know if you know this, but I'm the only Black bank manager in the state of Oregon. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. And I also work with other people. And one of the things that we're doing and we're passionate about is getting information out and helping educate around the topic of financing and funding to entrepreneurs and individuals in the BIPOC community, people of color, and letting them know about programs and information out there for them. Is that something you would be interested in? And I was like, if we're really talking about access, equity, and inclusivity, that is in itself the number one thing. I love it when politicians or people say, with rising tides, all boats float. And that's true if you have a boat. And for all those out there who don't have a boat, when the tide rises, they're paddling for their lives so that they won't drown. So how we look at this, how we talk about this, and how we go forward, one of the root issues is going to be how do we address equity, inclusivity, and access to funding for everyone. And so we decided to throw this program in on the 21st of this month, Sunday at 1. We are going to have the original program and talk about some of the history that is Portland's dance community and how it relates to where we are now. And one of the things is, how do you think that Herrero, Keith Martin dancers, Oregon Ballet Theater, Ballet Oregon, Dancers Workshop, the Conduit, what do they all have that connects them? And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, and how people of color are all connected to some of those entities and others. So that's enough of the introduction. I want to bring on our very first guest, who kind of made this possible, really, by giving me a phone call. And that's Travious Shanklin. He is the bank manager at KeyBank. And he's my bank manager, and I'm really glad to have him on our program. So Travious, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for that kind introduction as well. And Thank you for you and your team and staff for allowing me to join this call today.
Well, what you're doing is really important. And this talk about funding and finances is really important. A lot of people may not know that the state of Oregon was founded as an all white state. In the history of Oregon, when it was first started as a state, our founding fathers of Oregon thought we were going to make a perfect state and it's going to be totally white. Well, they'd be kind of, I think, happily disappointed that we have a very diverse community that is Oregon and that is Portland. So I'm glad you're here to share some of the stuff that you're doing and that KeyBank is doing. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you guys are doing in that area.
So, one of the things is being one of the co-presidents for our African Heritage KeyBank in our Portland and Alaska markets. We're really trying to get into our communities, our Black and diverse communities, to really give that financial support. One of the things that I am currently in the process of getting out into the community and giving my knowledge to, especially Black-owned business owner and performing artists and entrepreneurs, is the Paycheck Protection Program. And this is a program that was administered through the SBA for the stimulus packages that we have. And what we really have said it is a stimulus packages for small businesses. And so, since that said, there are a lot of black business owners that are not familiar with that program, and that funding is for all small businesses, not our corporations, but our small businesses. And so, with us getting out here and really giving that knowledge about how to apply it for that program so people can get funded, just a quick statistic for the Paycheck Protection Program. That's called the PPP program, so I'll refer to that as the PPP program. Is if you can show from 2019 any quarter throughout the year compared to 2020, and you had a 25% drop in gross receipts or revenue, then you're automatically qualified for this program. And so, one thing that you can start working on is that you can get your financials in order so that whenever it comes for them to collect documentation that you're already ready. One simple thing would be is how you're paying yourself as being the owner of the business or being an employee of the business. That's something that's very important that you want to get done ahead of time so it saves you some time. And we're currently going through. We my program is putting on at least 3 events this year, just focused around all Black small business Black owners. I mean, it's everybody, but just kind of focusing on those individual communities. And we're looking to partner with anybody. I'm here for any knowledge that you may have, and I can definitely be that financial support. And I'm easy to talk to. And as Robert said, I'm here to do what I can to make our communities great around the Portland area.
Let me ask you a question. Now, I know that you're with KeyBank, but if somebody wanted to work with you or find out more information, do they have to be a KeyBank member or have a KeyBank account?
Not at all, Robert. That's all about networking, and I'm here and free and open. I have a LinkedIn page. You can find Robert. I have my contact information, and please reach out if you have any questions or want to get connected.
Yeah, so I won't forget. We'll have his contact information down below after this airs, and it's on the Facebook page and the YouTube page. But if you guys have any other questions, you can write in now. And if you're on, I'll try to get him to Travious while we're talking with him. Otherwise, you can reach him at Travious_J_Shanklin at keybank.com. Travious, tell me a little bit more about some of the struggles that you see people from the color Black, oh, my brain's going dead, the communities of color are some of the struggles they're having and are dealing with when they apply for such loans or grants.
Okay, I'll give you just a quick background of where I come from, real quick, Robert. If I have time for that, is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so being originally from Texas, I was born with a very diverse set of friends. I was an athlete, so I was always kind of the kid with that knew everybody. And so me growing up, I never really looked at color like really if it made me different from my buddy that's white, Caucasian, or Asian, whatever it may have been. And so when I moved to Portland about 15 to 10 years ago, um, that really opened my eyes because there wasn't as much diversity. When I went to Portland State University, in most of my classes, I was the only African American in that class, and it put an extra burden on me because it was harder to just connect with just somebody of the same background and shares the same culture as me. And so I'm just one that's always made it a fun thing, is always being connected. But I don't want to be around a hundred of me. I'd probably be very mad at myself if I was around a hundred of me. So I want to be a very diverse background. And so when I went to Portland, I seen that, and when I got into the really my career with KeyBank, I seen that there was a need for Black leaders in our communities because there wasn't a strong presence, I would say, of community involvement together, being and doing different things. And so through KeyBank, I'm able to really leverage my kind of background and my professional background to really help and build others up. And so, Robert, can you just restate that question that you originally asked me? Because I kind of went off on a tangent about my background, please.
No, that's great. Again, that's where we've been and where we are, and how do we get to where we're going? What are some of the things that you see people struggle with when, or avenues that are of struggle when people are trying to find out about how to apply for this grant or how to find out about opportunities that are available to them?
So one thing I would say is a lot of banks did not do a great job in reaching out to the small businesses accounts that they had, or personal accounts either. And so I felt like the knowledge that our Black communities were getting was not as of they were in the know and knew exactly what direction to go to get funding, get grants, get the loans that had the cheap interest rates, whatever it may have been. And so I think that KeyBank, we were a leader. We're trying to be the advocates to be able to be a source for you to get these deals and get these grants and money so you can continue running your business or grow your business too. And so the struggle is when African Americans were applying for these dollars through their banks, they were getting declined, and there wasn't a reason to why, or explain to them why they were getting declined. And a lot of them just left it at that because it was either they didn't have the knowledge to go do it, or it was just kind of a hard process that didn't know if it was going to end up to be something fortunate for them at the other end. And so just I would say that I'm here as an advocate to kind of tell you and help you walk through the steps of the process. KeyBank's done a fantastic job with making a digital profile so you can do this from the comfort of your living room. You can pick up the phone, call me, send me an email. Robert sends me emails, and I'll just give him a call real quick, and we'll discuss whatever is going on, just so it's not a time-consuming process, and he has direct contact to me. So that's just the thing that I want to put out there to our communities and anybody that wants to connect. I'm here for that.
That's really interesting you say that, because, we've been, I think, a member of KeyBank for 15 years or more. So it's one of the first accounts we opened when we started Polaris Dance Theater. And
Thank you.
You're right about that, because what's unique about you, Travious, is that we didn't get really any information from KeyBank directly, but you called me up and you said, "Hey, Robert, did you hear about this?" And I was like, "No, thank you." And you constantly kept sending me little other emails or other texts that said, "Hey, did you hear about this other program?" Which wasn't even related to KeyBank, but you were reaching out to us because you know that as an arts organization that we were struggling to keep our doors open and to pay our rent and pay our staff. And you took it an extra mile on yourself to just kind of reach out and make sure that any information you got, that you were passing it along to me, and then we would pass it on to other people. And I think that's really key, is that how are we getting the information out to these communities, and how are these communities sharing it with themselves? And one of the things we find as an organization is that, our strong point is our product, doing classes, teaching, creating works. That's our product. We're not really, and I would admit, specialists at navigating funds and funding, and are as educated as we would like to be. We've learned a lot on the road. But one of the keys, I think, is of equity and inclusivity and accessibility is making sure that you just don't post something, that you put it somewhere that everybody can see it. And when I say everybody, you've done research to what does that mean, everybody? And are we reaching this demographic? Are we reaching that audience? Because of the pandemic, we're learning so much about connectivity and accessibility, even with our kids not being able to go to school. Who's not getting lunches and who's not getting access to their classrooms because of their situations or their Wi-Fi, lack of Wi-Fi or equipment. So accessibility, I think, is information. Do you see that Bank of America or financial institutions are doing things differently because of COVID and the shutdown concerning the PPP and other programs?
Robert, I would say, of course, they are, but at what capacity is unknown. I can speak on behalf of KeyBank that KeyBank's efforts in that aspect is enormous. KeyBank's done a great job at really honoring what's going on and making sure that they're being a positive change to the current circumstances. Our current CEO, Chris Gorman, is a fantastic leader, and he's wanting us to go out there and get into our community. So that's why I don't know as to what capacity other banks are doing it, but I know that KeyBank is passionate and we're working on it currently right now. And I feel like we need to know what's going on, the problems and the things that you face on a day to day, that we can come in and support and help out. One thing we have is Key at Work, is just a free program that if you're a member of KeyBank, even if you're not, your business may be in some state or some form of fashion. We have classes around financial wellness, first time home buying, and budgeting and savings. And those are just some of the things that we offer at KeyBank. And then, like I said, Robert, I think that this is a good opportunity to get some feedback from your members, the people you're connected with. If there's something that we can do to help out, I am connected with the leadership council at KeyBank, so I have a lot that I can bring to the table to be able to get some decisions and actions made, Robert.
Yeah, this is a really great point that he points out. And he's not talking about calling up and complaining or bitching about the situation, but sometimes, we want things from our leaders or people in positions of assistance, and they don't always have access to the information in the trenches. And sometimes just letting them know what we're dealing with, what we're going through, some of the struggles we're facing, then they can kind of get a sense of what's out there and what they need to do with. Travious, someone just once wrote a question here. We're going to see if you can pass this on to you. They said, what is the availability for individuals who are on a 1099 earnings situation?
And that's perfect. We're taking on those type of applications all day. If you have a 1099, it's showing what you're paying yourself as being a 1099 employee, contractor, contract to your business or to whoever you're getting contract through. And so if you can show a loss of that 25%, that paperwork that you pay yourself, if it's through your CPA, that's all you need to really prove that point of what you're paying yourself and that you've seen the loss, if it's bank statements or if it's through a payroll source or that 1099.
So that 25% loss, is that a loss of any part of your earnings, or is that just part of what you would pay for the employees and yourself?
So it would be of your gross receipts, gross income, gross sales, and to one of your individual contractors is a little different. And we can go off one-on-one if you want to send somebody with that information, but we can help 1099 employees get the PPP program.
Awesome. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share about some of the programs or things that you're doing with KeyBank or with others in the community?
Yes, we're currently looking. We just started our African Heritage chapter for Oregon and Alaska this in 2020. It's in the midst of everything, what was going on, and so we're really looking to find some organizations to be a sponsor with, partner with, to do events and activities, especially in our African American community. So if you have anybody that has any interest, nonprofits, to want to do anything with us, please give me a reach out and let's discuss what we can do and see how we can partner with each other.
Awesome. You guys, again, this is Travious Shanklin with KeyBank. You do not have to be a KeyBank member or have a KeyBank account. You can reach out to him, Travious_J_Shanklin at keybank.com. And at the same time, if you do have a personal relationship with your banker, go in and ask them. That's their job. They're there to facilitate, because you're their customer, you're their client, and if they're not doing what Travious is doing, then maybe you should switch banks or ask them why they're not helping you out there. Travious, I really appreciate what you're doing. And I think we need more people like you in the community reaching out and making that little bit extra effort. It's really helped out us a lot. So again, you guys reach out to Travious if you have any other further questions and find out more about some of the programming that he's doing. Thank you, Travious.
Thank you, Robert. And I look forward to talking to whoever is interested or has questions or concerns. Please let me know. And Robert, I'll be talking to you soon.
Yes,
and thank
you
you for
will.
allowing me the opportunity to join your live show.
Yes, you will. Thank you, my friend.
You're
okay,
welcome.
Take care.
You too.
Okay. Again, you guys, there's one of the things about it. It is a jungle out there. And if you're looking for funding or financing, this shutdown and COVID has really, I don't want to use well, I'm just going to say threw a wrench in the works. But what's amazing is I think everyone is learning a lot about our community, learning a lot. And despite the walls that exist in our community, we're learning to create new bridges that didn't exist before. One of the examples is, typically as an organization like ours, we would go to this foundation or that fund or this grant, and right away, these amazing foundations were starting to get together because they saw how this was going to affect us. And nobody really knows. We're not done. We're not through this. But they started to get together to make it simpler because they knew people are going to be needing help. Groups and individuals and organizations were going to need help. So they started working together and they started putting their funds together so that we didn't have to go to 10 foundations. We could just go to this one foundation and all 10 would be represented in that. At the same time, the need is so great. I'll share with you a story that happened with us. We knew that this grant opportunity was going to be coming. We got everything together. We're waiting for them to announce it. And the day it got announced, it opened. We started applying. We started filling out the forms and sending stuff in. And then we saw, we need one more thing. We called up our accountant, and our accountant got us the information by 2:00 that day. At 3:00, we submitted the first day this opened. And they got back to us and said, we're sorry, no more applications can be accepted. We ran out of money and we've got too many applications. That was within 6 hours of them opening, it shut. So the demand is huge. The need is huge. And I want to invite my two next guests onto this program who have been doing amazing and really important work in the community around accessibility, access, and equity concerning funding and funds. And the person I'd like to bring on is Subashini she's the Art Laureate of Portland. And I'd also like to welcome Brian Rogers, who's the Executive Director of the Oregon Arts Commission and the Oregon Trust. Brian is a giant and he leads an amazing team that funds a lot of the work that people see and maybe take for granted. If it wasn't for the help and guidance that his organizations provide, Oregon would be way back in the Wagon era. Suba, welcome, and Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Brian, let's starting with you. Let's talk a little bit about what you do and some of the work you guys are doing at Oregon Arts Commission, Oregon Trust, in the community.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Robert. Well, one of the things that we've done differently, obviously, during the COVID is we had 3 different waves of coronavirus relief funding that we managed. The first was money from the National Endowment for the Arts, which was about $450,000 that we put into about 150 organizations pretty quickly. The second wave was a huge program that we received federal funding from the Oregon legislature. And the Cultural Trust received $26 million of a $50 million package that was put together by the legislature to fund culture across the state. That $50 million program was the largest in the country by far. The next biggest program was in Ohio. And I think it's a testament
Wow.
to have, the Oregon Cultural Trust there and ready to accept money and distribute it in a very, very quick timeline. We were able to fund over 620 organizations across the state. We got back a lot of response from people that it was actually saved their organization, that it helped them get through and prepare to get on the other side of this. And Polaris Dance Company was one of the recipients of the funding as well. So it's pretty amazing. And then the most recent one, Travious was talking about this as well as you, Robert, that when funders get together, they can, pull their resources and do an amazing thing. And we work with the Oregon Community Foundation and the Miller Foundation to put together an artist relief program, a $1.25 million program. We received close to 1,200 applications from across the state, and we're able to fund a little over half of them. And the funders had some values that they wanted to make sure were applied in the program, like geographic reach was a big one. The other one that we looked very closely at was, the communities of color, artists of color, and to make sure that they were well represented in our funding. So the American Indian and Alaskan Native category, we asked people to self-define their race. Of the applications that we received, we were able to fund 75% from the American Indian, Alaskan Native. The Asian community were able to fund 68% of the applications funded. The Black and African American race, we were able to fund 74% of the applications that were submitted. And the white category, it was 51%. So what we found in this application process was, one, we received applications from a lot of artists that we never received applications from.
Awesome.
Non-English speakers applied, and we have a person on staff who is fluent in Spanish. And we actually filled out applications online for people who didn't have access to the internet. So what we found out is that, we had 29 people serve on panels for a week to adjudicate applications. What we found is that artists of color generally, obviously, scored higher, and were very, very competitive in this process. So that was something that we learned as funders, and we're continuing to kind of look at the data and to explore what we can do in the future together.
That's really awesome. Thank you for sharing that information. Subashini, can you also maybe share a little bit about what you see as the art laureate in our community concerning funding and some of the struggles that our fellow artists of color are maybe dealing with that maybe other communities aren't?
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. And thanks for giving that overview, Brian. It feels helpful to think about what we've done in 2020 between COVID relief and really paying attention to the social justice movement, right? That really has heightened the understanding of the different platforms that we have when artists or arts organizations or artist collectives are applying. In terms of, there's so much to say about what you just asked, Robert. So I think the most important thing that I wish we would keep remembering even after COVID is over is that what last year did was highlight the inequities, right? It wasn't as if something new happened.
Right.
It created this understanding of, oh, this exists. And if you think it's not just in the arts, right? In education, in the digital divide, there's so much that we've learned that we could have just dealt with if we were paying more attention and not living in what we used to call normal. So for artists and arts organizations who are predominantly not of the dominant world, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, Asian American, I think it's been this discussion of what can we do beyond what we're already doing? Because the work that all these artists and arts organizations have been doing is a lot. And then to add development and to add the, how do I keep in, you were talking about this, Robert, how do I stay in touch with all the opportunities that are coming up? How am I ahead of the game so that when the game starts and within the first hour, I can apply, right? For many of our communities, we're just doing the work. We don't really have that one professional development or fundraising person dedicated to searching the internet and keeping a database and telling us about applications. So that is what I'm interested in. How do we keep bringing information to our communities as often as possible? But also, it's not just about providing here is the Excel spreadsheet with all the deadlines. How can we provide useful templates? How can we provide helpful language? Just like your previous guest was talking about, how can we be not just a resource of information, but resource of support right now and for the years to come? Because it's the relationship that's going to change this difference in platform. That's how I feel. And it's I feel super strongly, and I know there are lots of community members and leaders who feel that. I'm clearly not speaking in data, but there's a lot of, just bringing out some meat here, and let's see where we go.
I think that's really important because when we're talking about inclusivity, a lot of that is to the point, how if you don't have the staff or the manpower or the hours to really devote, how is that fair to you? Why are you asking this person to meet what this organization has to meet, and you want them to fill out the same thing? Is that really fair for the people who don't have the resources, which is also time, while they're creating things and making things and doing what they're good at? Is that really fair to create the same template, the same platform? And this whole discussion, as we are unpeeling this onion that has already been there, always have been there, is that as we unpeel, we realize the complexity of our community and the complexity of everyone who's a part of it. And that there is no quick answer, there is no quick fix to any of this. But as we continue to peel away those layers of what's out there, and it just becomes, I feel, when I'm looking at it, really overwhelming. How do you fix this? How do you help that when everyone's need is the same, but not the same?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree, Robert and Suba. The amount of information in the different places it is stored makes it extremely difficult for an artist or an organization to focus on things. And I think, with the Portland Regional Arts and Cultural Council, a resource like that, like RAC, they do a really good job in trying to organize. Also, Apano, the Native Arts and Culture Foundation, I think they're amazing, the way they provide information. I think what we can do is help people focus on the different programs that are available. The Oregon Arts Commission, the Oregon Cultural Trust, we are part of Business Oregon, which is the state's economic development agency, and they have on their page a small business page that focuses in for small businesses, and a lot of those opportunities are encouraging BIPOC owned businesses to apply. And the other thing too is the national dialogue that funders are having is that we are extraction-based application, meaning that we extract information from organizations and artists. Is there a way we can change that we're not making organizations and artists conform to what we want to look at? And are we approaching organizations for who they are and getting to know them and to make informed decisions without undue burden? And we all have different applications. So, Robert,
yeah. We all
Yeah.
have different lenses. I want to share one of the things we were going with. A lot of, and I've been in this. I've been an artist for almost 50 years, and I've seen a pattern where that we go through these cycles of where the big push was equity and inclusivity, and then it would just kind of feather away, and then 10 years it's back again. Everyone's like, well, we've got to be more diverse. And I remember going to a foundation, and I was like, you want me to measure our diversity? And how would you like us to measure it? Because, any way you want to do that. And I was like, well, how do you want us to do it? And they were like, well, in confidence, they said, you know what? We don't even know how to do it within our own organization. And she said, so right now we're just letting everybody do this. And this is what one person did. They took a photo of their audience and they used the photo to describe the diversity. And I was like, well, how do you identify the altered ability or disabled in? How do you identify the Latinos from the Cubans, it's like, it's so complex what we're being asked to do. And there is no magic answer for any one organization to address their impact they're making on diverse communities. I'm going to let you guys jump in.
Yeah, what resonates with me are some of the discussions that a lot of us are having, which is we've built, when we look at grants, there's a grant language, right? There's the words capacity building and general operating support and project support. And when we think about definitions, it's a world that's been created for the world of development and fundraising and grant writers. But if we're really trying to create relationships with artists, arts organizations, and communities who should really be getting the money, then what does it mean to have this language that is sort of out there? It's sort of abstract language that's been built for a system that perhaps doesn't serve our communities. And, really, I think even in the philanthropy world, there's that whole concept of trust-based philanthropy. There's a lot of conversations happening. And I think in the last year, we've seen national, regional, and, local organizations really thinking and restructuring applications, right? I'm grateful that the Miller Foundation has created a rolling deadline type of grant. There's fast track and a letter of intent. And the questions are not onerous. And I feel like, to the best of our ability, we've created language that is transferable, right? So that's one way I think that we can really speed up building relationships. And then how do we keep creating ways for us to gather and learn from one another? I want to go back, Brian, to the Oregon Cultural Trust money that you were getting out. What was it, in July of 2020? And we had this webinar that described what was going on and what organizations would be eligible and what eligibility really meant. And I heard from so many folks in our community how that made a difference, because I think there currently is an overload of emails and words and PDFs. So just having these conversations that are as live as possible, even though it's on Zoom, I think is a new way to look at what relationships could look like, right? And yeah, I'm going to stop there. Chime in and think about.
I think you're right, Sue, but for us as a statewide agency, the silver lining in all this is that people are able to meet through the computers, through the internet, for the most part. And our reach has expanded greatly because we're able to meet up with people. So for example, the Cultural Trust does an annual campaign to encourage people to donate. And we raise in the order of $4.5 million each year from 9,000 donors, which we turn around and then put
Wow.
into grant making programs. It's a 100% state tax credit. So any donation to the Oregon Cultural Trust comes back to you on your state taxes. So if you give us $10, you'll get that $10 back on your state taxes. We were able this fall to meet with 160 boards of cultural organizations across the state. And each board, let's say that's 10 people. In regular times, the before times, we were lucky if we were able to get to 25 or 30 boards. And we're also doing a lot of what you talked about, Sue, was the information session we did about the program. We also have our county and tribal coalition. So every county and tribe has a group that receives a block grant from the Cultural Trust that they then make project awards in their communities to artists and cultural organizations. And we work very closely with them to provide a decentralized service and communication route. And we saw a lot of new organizations come in. It's a challenge to get information out and to get it out in a clear, concise way that people can understand and feel comfort level to come to a statewide agency and apply. So yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that one, Suba.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you. And I totally agree with you, Brian, that I think one of the wins from this terrible shutdown and pandemic is that we're learning to do things differently because we've had to. And through that misery and re-evaluating or reconstruction, I don't think there's a lot of going back to whatever it was. I think we're really now aware of new things and new ways of doing things that maybe are going to really make the road wider and easier for more people. And I'm really excited about some of the technology. I mean, like Zoom was nothing when this pandemic started, and now it's like a household, everyone's Zooming. Some of my questions are twofold. Just like a lot of other, for an example, the U.S. government wants to hand out $1,400 checks to everyone. And they're really trying to figure out, well, how do we make sure we're getting it to the people who need it and not to the people who don't need it? And what's interesting is that there's no platform for people to self-identify to say, I don't need this, I'm doing fine, we've got our home, we've got food, we're not getting kicked out. There's no platform for that. But at the same time, there are also individuals and entities that are taking advantage of this and getting hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that they don't need from these limited funds. So my first question to be pondered over is, how do we make sure that these much needed funds are going to the places that really need them and not to the individuals that are really okay where they are? Mm-hmm. And my second part of the question is, you mentioned some really important numbers, like 60% got funded from this monies. What happened to that other 30% who didn't get it, and what avenues are there for them? Or do they just go away and get kicked alongside the road? What else is there for them? And is there opportunities down the road for the ones who didn't get in or get help earlier?
It's heartbreaking, Robert, for our Artist Relief Program that unfortunately we did have to say no to some people, and that was based on the review by the peer review panel that adjudicated the applications. And the funders as a group, the Oregon Community Foundation, Miller Foundation, and the Arts Commission, struggled with that and decided to make the awards between $1,000 and $5,000, and to make meaningful awards to those artists that were receiving support. So I think in the future we have to deal with that. We have to see if we can find new money to help more artists. The other thing too is that I should point out, you were saying about people who might not necessarily need the money, that we actually had some artists call us up and say, I'm going to decline my award because I think there's people out
Wow.
there that need it more than I do.
Beautiful.
So we're able to redistribute that money, and people with household support, income and resources within their household, withdrew their applications too. So I think, artists understand that there's people out there who need it more.
Yeah. When Kim Stafford, the poet laureate at that time, and I started the Artist Relief Fund early March last year, right? We had the same thing as we were getting information out. We had artists write back and say, look, in the last 4 weeks, my situation has changed. Please give this money to someone else. Several folks even donated some money, to the actual relief fund. So that that clarity that artists and arts organizations are predominantly populated by people who care and people who have integrity, I think is an important message that we have to keep remembering. When the checks were coming out, the stimulus checks were coming out last year, and both December and was it June? I know that there was a lot of campaigning that was being done by folks who are getting the money and who said, here's a list of organizations that we could redistribute this money to if we don't need it. So that kind of mutual aid programs have been happening on an individual level. How we bring it up to highlight this in an organizational and maybe in a funder level is something to think about, because I still believe that if we give folks the avenue to redistribute their money, they will do it. And how do we do it is the question. And how do we do it quickly and in an effective way that folks can just go boom, boom, right? That'll be fabulous. And then thinking about what is next, we have lots of opportunities that are opening up and have, deadlines between now and say April for individual artists and arts collectives. Like, just specifically the Regional Arts and Culture Council is doing this Learn, Make, Build granting program, which is either $1,500 or $3,000, and it can be for artists or arts organizations. The Oregon Community Foundation has two. One is the Creative Heights, which is for arts organizations, and we've got I guess this is a collaboration between OCF and Oregon Humanities for the Field Fellowship, right? And then there is, and then in a national level, the Creative Capital folks have just opened up the annual artist award program. I'm citing a lot of things that are not relief based, right? Now we're coming into project based and arts based. So if you're making work or if you're getting ready to make work, there are lots of opportunities available. I'm not sure, Brian, and maybe you can help me with this. I'm seeing less and less of the relief funding opportunities, and I'm seeing more and more of we're re-entering that create programs or think about projects world. And personally, I'm curious about the speed at which we're going with that. And that's, maybe something to think about, because I think, artists, some folks are ready to make work, have been ready to make work ever since Corona started, but others are just kind of figuring it out, finding what inspiration means, what's the next step. So how do we take care of both and not drop the relief just because 2020 is over, right? Just because we think with the vaccines and what's happening next, we're moving into, So that's something to think about a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, here in Oregon, the cultural sector was the second hardest hit sector and probably the fastest that saw the decline in revenue while expenses continued. And it was only right behind accommodations. And I think accommodations are slowly coming back. But yeah, you're right. I think that, continuing relief support is extremely important. The other thing that we're doing is we've put all of our operating support grants on interim status, meaning they don't have to fill out the narrative. We're just going to continue their funding without the paperwork, minimal, tiny little bit of paperwork. In project-based grants, I think, the whole concept of those, when they were created 70 years ago, is about encouraging organizations to explore new things or to continue existing program, but to change that and modify it and reach different audiences. So it's that balance that we struggle with as funders to find out how much more relief funding is needed and how much I need to continue my programming money is needed, and how to address that in a reasonable way.
I can speak as somebody who has a studio and we have a venue. We've calculated that there's almost 60 performances that didn't happen in this since our shutdown at our space. And one of the things is that we are constantly reaching out to our constituency, our students and audience, and saying, if we do this, would you come back? When would you feel comfortable? And I think that even after the vaccines get distributed, that we're going to have a very long period where people's revenue streams on how they normally made revenue through their programming is still not going to be there, because people are still hesitant to come back into the studio and take classes or come back and watch a performance. And they're still very fearful. And I think that, everyone's crossing their fingers and hoping that these vaccines come sooner. But I think even just speaking for ourselves, we went up above and beyond. We said, we're not 6 feet apart. We're making 8-foot boxes. We're only allowing 6 in this room where we normally had 25. Would you be interested? And I would say 80% said, we love you. We support you. We're not in. We're not in yet. So this is a tough question. And I don't know how we find out about when do we stop helping and when do we start looking forward to projects, and how do we do both?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think just to make that balance, I think those in leadership and those leaders who've been around the block for a little bit, it would be great if we lobbied, right? If we were able to say, hey, we know that this community is creating projects and they've been creating projects. Let's highlight them for this kind of funding opportunities, and to say, here's a whole community of folks who need to continue receiving relief. I mean, I think, is there a way that we're all constantly sharing information, both in the helping people write and get grants information basis, but also sharing information about what we're seeing about our communities? Because that might help. I don't know. I'm just throwing that in.
I think this is a really important point that you bring out, that, and I think I don't have an answer for this, but one of the things, one of the reasons we're doing this LeanIn program, and one of the core functions and passions about Polaris, is that we want to find ways to tear walls down and build bridges and figure out how do we work together. I understand this, but I don't understand this, is if we're going to survive as an entity, how do we start sharing resources? How do we come together and get over the elitism and inferiority or the frustration that we have that there's too many of them out there and there's too many of us and there's not enough to go around? We need to figure out a way that we can come together. And if we come together, who's invited? How do they get invited? And if they're coming to this proverbial table of invitation to lobby or to have a voice, are they there only in sitting at the seat, or do they have teeth at the table? Were they given a fork and a knife to really participate in these groups. And I think that as we move forward, that we start looking for ways to build bridges, that we need to look at who's allowed to be on the bridge, and at how much access and how much equity and equal standing do they have, from big and powerful and well-funded organizations to individuals. Where's the equity in those? This is not a question I'm expecting to answer. It's just a question to throw out there, because I know, me for one, I would really like to figure out how to address this and how to answer it. But anyone who's been at it, like Suba has mentioned, anyone who's been around the block for a while, the more times you go around the block, the more you realize how complex the situation is, and that there is no one answer. There is no easy fix for this $1,400 check they want to hand out, or for funding that we think is really important for our community. So if you want to share, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there can be a lot gained by continuing to work in the K through 12 education arena. We have a small program, but I think we have teenage boys here, and the way they and their friends think is completely different than our generation, right? They're much more creative and thoughtful and explore things differently. And I think I think this generation coming out of COVID is going to be probably a lot more creative and have more resources available to them than generations not growing up in COVID. So it might be interesting for us to kind of think about K through 12 in more ways.
That's really valid. I see that as well. I used to think that my dad's generation needed to die off to make the world a better place. And now I'm thinking, it looks like for the past 4 years, it looks like my generation also might need to maybe move along, so that this next generation, one of the things that I'm excited about is that the next generation, and how do we give them the tools? I think they are seeing and learning a lot because of the shutdown and because of their access or lack of it. They're learning things that, there's so many people in my generation, because of the shutdown, that all of a sudden are awake, and they want to become socially active, and all of a sudden they want to call out other people that aren't, being silent. And I'm like, I'm so glad that you finally woke up and you finally are seeing some of the inequities that have always been here. I'm glad you're starting to march now, but get in line. We've been doing this, and I'm glad. But it's like this new generation, I feel like they are so far ahead of the ones of us that have already been here. I'm remaining hopeful. That's where I'm keeping my finger crossed, is how do we give them the tools to become tomorrow's leaders.
Look, I grew up in Singapore, so I don't know if I want my generation to die off yet, my friend. But but I will say that, if we think about the reality that we're all growing on top of so many other folks' shoulders, the fact that there's so much information available, and good and bad, there's all this philosophical problems about the excessive amount of information. But I think our current generation is benefiting from all the technological movements of progress that has allowed for our young folks to get the things that they should be getting, right? But Brian, this whole thing about K-12 education, I completely agree. And how then can we make sure that arts and culture is funded well through the times, right? I mean, I think a lot of the problems come from arts being taken out of schools because of lack of funding. But we all, I mean, this is the choir, I'm preaching to the choir. We all know that humanity is, I mean, one of the pillars of humanity is being able to be artistically involved. I don't have to be an artist, but what does it mean to have that creativity, right? So if K through 12 doesn't have the opportunities for arts to be present, then we're
It doesn't create value.
Yeah. Our young people, right? And so if this last year and hopefully this year shows how important arts and culture is, not just for performances, but for being a human being. We see this, we hear this. I mean, I hear this from so many people. Oh, I miss going to the museum. I miss being able to walk down the street and hear music. So how do we remind everybody that arts and culture is not a luxury? It should be given money. And how can we keep reminding everybody that don't stop giving us funding, right? And I think that's part of that sharing and the constant discussion. And the 40% or 45% of folks who didn't get money through our relief, the Oregon Arts Commission Relief Fund, how do we keep them in the conversation, and how do we find ways for them to receive monies now and for the future? What is there? I mean, I feel like this is what I do. I keep thinking of, do we have a database? Do we have a way to reach each other? Is it like a LinkedIn for artists? I mean, there's so many ways that we could be taking care of one another, and keep reminding everybody that arts is essential.
Yeah, I think, I couldn't agree more. So the whole concept of changing public will about arts and culture from it being considered a nicety to a necessary part of everyday life. And maybe another silver lining is that we've all collectively have become a little more introspective. We've quieted down and been able to think a little bit, even with everything else going on the national platform.
Yeah.
You see a lot of creativity. As you're stumbling around on Facebook, you see like, oh my gosh, these people are really, I never would have thought of that activity or expression. People are expressing themselves a lot now, and that creative expression is extremely important, as for a human being to do. And now that we've kind of had a little space to do that, do we now start to have that public will about arts and culture shift? And does that then impact decision makers in the education arena, to get back to your point, Suba, is to fund the arts and culture back into schools the way it should be? Because if you talk to businesses, and being part of Business Oregon, you hear businesses want creative people to work for them, people that can think differently and solve problems that are complex, and use their expression more and communicate what they're doing. And if it's not in schools, where do they learn it? Some people will figure it out, but most people won't.
It's very, very true. Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you guys, there is no way in an hour could we handle the complexity of the funding world and the needs for funding and who's out there and who needs and who asks. This is an ongoing subject. This is really important. I'm glad there's people like you, Brian, at the leadership position at Oregon Arts Commission and the Oregon Trust. Subashini, you've been an amazing art laureate. I would like to spend just the last few minutes talking about maybe some opportunities that you know of that are coming up, or things that people should be looking for or thinking about in the near coming future. And then I would just add that everyone start thinking about coming together. We all need to come together and have these conversations and figure out, and we can't just leave it up to people like Brian to solve the world's problems. We are all a part of this. We all need to come together and figure out how can we work together better. But I'm going to turn it over for you guys and let you share what we can look towards this coming future.
Suba, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. Although, Brian, I was thinking you were going to solve all the problems. Anyway,
I can't even figure out what I'm having for lunch.
the one thing I will say is, if anyone wants to use me as a resource, please connect with me. I'm on Facebook, the Creative Laureate of Portland. I have a Facebook page as well, but you can connect with me as Suba. I have 2 pages worth of resources, and the way I was thinking about it is, I think about arts in Portland and the region. And so there are organizations like RAC, and we've got the Miller Foundation, the Oregon Community Foundation, Collins. MRG Foundation is one that I want to just call out, because while their mission is not art-centered, the work that MRG has done, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, to think about bringing social justice and equity as a platform in our communities has been huge. And so we've got each county, as Brian will talk about, each county, each community in Oregon has its own group of folks that we can go and learn from, and perhaps even get funding. Within Portland itself, we've got different community spaces like Southeast Uplift, or there's the North Portland Neighborhood Services, which I think was called the Kenton Plan. And so find out what's in your neighborhood and see if there are community engagement projects that could be coming up, and learn to find out if there's a way to build ways of getting money and building relationships and elevating the sense of community that way as well. And then and then I sort of move a little by little up into regional and national. And of course, I would say, everybody, if you get a chance, please try and get on Americans for the Arts, which is www.americansforthearts.org, because while they are sort of a lobbying group, they also give a lot of information. And the last thing that I'm always feeling is, we're all often talking about funding and financial resources, but the most traction, I think, for the long term, and maybe it's a personal thing, are the non-financial ways of getting resources that then translate something sustainable. So at this point, like, maybe we could be thinking about education, about workshops. Am I reading? How about residency opportunities, right? There's a lot within our community and nationally and internationally. So how do we open ourselves up to possibilities? It's hard to think about that when we're worried about rent and food. I completely agree with you. But how do we dream together rather than worry by ourselves and hope for the best, right? So please connect with me, and I will do my darndest best to get you connected to entities or organizations or people who might be able to help out.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, that is really great. I would recommend that folks join our mailing list, the Oregon Cultural Trust and the Oregon Arts Commission. We send out not a lot, we don't overload, but we send out pertinent information to the field. So it's a great way just to be able to have things filtered for you in your in-bin. And I'll just give you one quick program that we have coming up. A deadline of March 4th is our Career Opportunity Program for individual artists. And it helps them take advantage of a timely opportunity, like a residency. Residencies are still occurring. And we support all the artistic disciplines. And we also have a partnership with the Ford Family Foundation to help fund visual artists. So awards are between $500 and $1,500 and up to $9,000 for visual artists via the Ford Family Foundation. And also the Oregon Cultural Trust has some project deadlines coming up, as well as the Arts Commission. We also saw in the fall, I think it was October, we had an Arts Builds community deadline. And it's a program that supports arts organizations to work with non-arts organizations like the Chamber of Commerce or whatever to implement a project that helps the community address a problem, issue, need, or take advantage of an opportunity. Typically, we see about 40 applications a year. This year, we saw over 70. So I think people are really, we need to get activated. We need to do something. We need some funding to help do that, and we need access to resources. So, yeah, just keep an eye. We'll try to focus things in for you, and yeah, absolutely.
If anybody out there is listening to this and they think that they can help out or they can help with an access for other resources, please reach out to Brian. Please reach out to Subashini and become active, become a part of this. Suba, I had a question. Somebody had a question from Sam. They were asking, can I get that question back up there, do you think? What they wanted to know, can you put those 2 pages of resources online or in the public space somewhere? And if not, you could give it to me and we'll post a link in this for that.
That should be easy. I'll figure it out, and we'll make sure that it's cross posted, right?
You guys, I want to.
Brian, you want to add? We could add that too. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Sure.
You guys, I want to know. I want to share with you that I've, as an organization, Polaris Dance Theater has worked with Oregon's Arts Commission and the Oregon Cultural Trust, and they're there for assistance. So if you guys see an opportunity, you have questions about it, don't be immediately overwhelmed, which is the really easy to happen. Trust me. Reach out, ask questions. They have an amazing team that can assist you and help answer some of the questions and assist with filling things out. The other thing that I'd like to just share with you guys is that if you haven't received funding, on the average, I'm just speaking for our organization, we only get about 18% of all the funding and grants we go after. And we feel a good year is when we got 30% of the grants we went after. So not everyone gets everything. It's kind of the nature of it. So don't give up, don't get depressed, share your stories, reach out. You guys want to add anything to that?
I mean, yes, it's hard not to get depressed. It's hard not to feel, broken. But I think that's when I keep thinking about how do we keep having safe spaces and community to just have a conversation. It's not to wallow, I think, but
right.
We're all human. There needs to be a way for us to feel through this, bring back that sense of emotion, because we are artists and we're arts organizations. That's what we do. We build emotive ways of being, right? So, how do we not give up, and how do we take care of ourselves, right? That question of self-care, whatever. I didn't get those 10 grants. I'm just going to keep refocusing. That's the part where it feels a little kind of old school, the pull up your socks and just keep going, trudging along. My question is, how do we keep connecting as community and being aware of how much need there is? How do we keep sharing, and how do we keep growing in that sharing? That's what I find complex, right? Rather than the systems, I find how do we keep our humanity alive across the years and the months where we are making projects, but we're also trying to find resources to make these projects. So just adding to what you're saying, Robert, that's all.
You hit on something really important that I'm also passionate about. And I'd like to figure out a way that we do start to work together and we do start to rely on each other. I think Portland has a syndrome. I'm just going to share this with you from my perspective. Whenever there's a new restaurant, everybody is so excited to go to the new restaurant, but the other restaurants that have been here, what happened to them? They still create good food. It's still a great place, but we're always interested in the new. And one of the things that I see that I'd like to address differently, and I'm just going to throw that on the table, that there's a lot of new artists that move to town. And we want to keep these artists here. And we're excited that there's more of this energy coming to our town. So we give that money to these new people, but how do we make sure that the ones, the small and the big, are still have the underpinning and the support to still be there? And one of the things that I think I'd like to look at is that when somebody new comes into town, maybe we find a way to make them partner up. We find a way for them to mentor, like a new budding artist that is just establishing himself as a choreographer. And they want to get support for an idea. And it's one of the things that would like to figure out is that how do we put them in a mentorship relationship with someone who's already been here, someone who's done marketing, someone who's done the production of actually doing this. And so we're giving money to the new voices in the field, as well as still supporting the structures and the people that are already here. That's huge. That's complicated. It's not easy, but more ways that we can find to work together. And I'm speaking to the community. You guys, we need to get over our egos and our elitism, and we really need to look at ways that, maybe we can share studios. I know Suba has this amazing place called New Expressive Works, where she's doing that. And us at Polaris, we're doing the same thing. We've got, well, before COVID, we had 18 different groups working out of our space. How do we share our resources and our spaces for the new ones, so they don't have to go out and get their own roof and their own shingle and their own place until they're ready for it, and they've had and then you've created a mentorship and a friendship with an organization that help them and they work together with them. There's so much in this topic. Brian, do you want to add anything before we say goodbye?
No, Robert, I was just going to say, I love what you're saying. I think one of the greatest examples of that happening for me is, Kim Stafford. Suba mentioned him. He was the previous state poet laureate, and the friendship and mentorship, and probably the mentorship goes both ways with Anish Mojani, the current state poet laureate. I mean, it's just like magical the way those two can be in the same space and build that relationship and communicate and share the love.
Share the love.
Yeah.
We're going to end it right there, you guys. Share the love. Thank you so much, Brian Rogers, and thank you, Subashini. I also want to say,
mind if I just say it's Subashini?
Oh,
Subashini. It's okay. It's all good.
No, this is
all good.
Subashini.
Yeah, there
Subashini.
we go. Nice.
Okay.
I
apologize. Forgive this little Mexican over here.
No worries, please.
Okay. You guys share the love, and I'm so thankful that you guys are all a part of this. And this conversation is much deeper than the hour that we've spent talking about it. I also want to thank Travious, who was a part of this. You guys reach out to Travious and anyone that you saw in this program. This will be recorded and you can see it later. Share it. With that, I'm going to say thank you for being here. And on the 21st of February at 1:00, we're going to bring in some other guests to talk about the original thing we were going to talk about, and that is communities of color and their contribution in history in the dance and art scene here in Portland. I want to sing out what they've done and their contributions to the past and to the future. So with that, you guys, Merd, I love you. Hang in there. We're not done. See you on the flip side. Ciao.